Hi, I'm Ruger, creator and director of Mexisoul Retreats, and I'm here with Jamie, who does the integration during our retreats. And I just returned home from my own retreat in Peru. Something we've been wanting to do for a long time is to create a video that discusses certain topics that are relevant for anyone returning home from a retreat. Given the fact that I am doing that right now, we figured it'd be very appropriate to discuss them. So these are some things that we kind of mentioned during the retreats anyway, but we're going to go into a little bit more depth on each topic. So the three topics we're going to discuss today are vulnerability, loneliness, and cultivating balance.
Yeah, I think this is kind of fun to do it today, Ruger, because you created Mexisoul and it's been happening for almost 2 years. So people come to your retreats and you've never been able to even go to one of your own retreats. So you finally, after 2 years, are in Peru at an ayahuasca retreat and you get to come home for the first time from a retreat that you didn't have to plan and organize. So it's kind of fun to be here talking to you now.
Something I've always said is I'd love to go to my own retreat, but that's not an option yet. So, Peru had to do.
Yeah, well, you run a beautiful retreat. So, okay, so your first topic is vulnerability, and these are the topics you chose. I usually am the one that chooses the topics at the retreat when we talk about coming home, but these are topics you felt like were really important. And so, what would you like to say about vulnerability?
Well, I think there's quite a bit to be said about vulnerability, and we're going to go into a few different areas with it. But one thing is when you come home, you've opened up a lot of places in yourself. You're coming from a place where you're, feeling emotions you haven't felt for a very long time. Some of the things are painful you're dealing with. Some of the things are really great and incredible. But so one of the things that I've noticed just from my own personal experience, and then also just from our past guests, is the emotions, like the emotional vulnerability. There's quite a bit of things that come to the surface. They come to the surface during the retreats and during the ceremonies, and then they're still there when you go home. So I guess maybe the first thing to talk about is emotions related to vulnerability. And I was going to see like if you have any, I guess, of your own feedback or experience from the people you've spoken with.
Well, I think it's important to realize that after you've gone to a plant medicine retreat, that when you come home, that a lot of your filters are down, a lot of your guards are down for a few days. And then that allows you to be more open with people, which is beautiful. It also allows you to feel things that you maybe weren't allowing yourself to feel. And, it's really a beautiful place to be, but it's also really important that we realize that you need somebody to talk to, somebody that's safe, that you can trust, that to share some of these feelings, because vulnerability is an extremely important part of growth and becoming more conscious and aware and creating more of what you want. But another problem is that because your prefrontal cortex is relaxed, that it's important to realize that you might be too vulnerable sometimes with the wrong people, or too vulnerable with people that can't relate to what you've gone through. And so it's important to be thinking about that before you even go to retreat. Like, who are your people that you can really talk to and share with and say anything to? And then maybe who are the people that would be better probably for you just to keep your experience to yourself?
I think that's a good point. I mean, even myself from this last retreat coming back, I just had, I think, a certain heightened level of emotions, both good, let's not say good, let's say, we're positive and kind of negative emotions, or just emotions that are more appropriate in certain times and other times not. So I noticed that I had been suppressing some amount of anger, and just so the first few days of when I came back, there are things that were just more, I guess, irritating me than they would have in the past. And it's just, I think the purpose or the best approach to those is to kind of just detach and become an observer, because ideally we want to come to a place where we're acknowledging those emotions. I think the most important thing though is just the fact being aware that this will happen, that this could happen. I mean, another thing too is just like, it's not necessarily things that are always just like anger. Like I had a tremendous sense of gratitude for certain things that, but even the response was not quite normal to what it normally would be. I mean, it's almost like when you hear about people that are gonna cry at like a Hallmark commercial. I wasn't quite to that point, but I mean, it was like I'd almost get this profound sense of gratitude where almost like you're almost gonna cry. And to something that maybe was disproportionate to the amount of gratitude I felt. But I mean, just the fact that those things are coming out, I think is the biggest key point with the emotions.
Yeah, and remember, even if it could be difficult emotions coming up that we think are socially not as acceptable, or these beautiful emotions of gratitude, but when your emotions are shown really big, to some people that might scare them, or they might not understand it, and so you're throwing people off balance a little bit who are around you if you're not aware of that. I mean, I came home the first time I did one of your, I was at your very first retreat, and I came home and I just isolated for a whole week because I had so many feelings, so many emotions. I didn't know what to do with them, and I was surprised by them. And so I just hunkered down and just took a lot of rest and self-reflected and walked in nature and just trying to, because I knew it would be good in the end, but it was overwhelming to me. So, and for being able to share it with my husband was lovely, but beyond that, it would have been too much, I think, for people to get a grasp on what I was processing. It was one of the best things I ever did, though, in my life, was go to that first retreat with you.
I'm glad you came. Something that I've realized lately too is with meditation. I always thought that meditation was kind of something you just use to relax and even maybe escape from feelings, but I've noticed that it's usually the opposite. There's been times with meditation where some of those feelings come up, but it puts you in a place where you're now you're not suppressing them. You're not really controlling them either, but it's more of with meditation, there is an amount of control, not on the emotion itself, but how you are responding and reacting to it. So giving it like a agency and acknowledging it. And so that's something I've been doing the past couple of days too, was like just sitting in some amount of silence or in a meditative state and letting those things come up, and then just kind of feeling them without much reaction to them.
So you've been using meditation as a tool to ground yourself since coming home. Is that that's what you're telling us? Yes.
Yeah. And it's something like, I guess it's a little bit, I mean, I don't really know what the purpose of meditation was, but I think that's one of the biggest benefits, and it's a different way for me of just looking at meditation.
I am a strong advocate for my own meditation. I spend at least an hour every day, early in the morning, meditating. And one of the things I'm doing is I'm looking at my own operating system. I'm looking at my own thoughts, my own beliefs, and challenging those, right? And so when you're home, when you come home, I would just advocate for meditation when you come home, so that you can sit in that place and let your body give you information and process and see your own thoughts and see your own feelings. And it's a great place to be vulnerable, is in the safety of your own home, meditating and processing from there.
I think another part or a topic that relates to vulnerability is, well, something I've realized is, you as a person, you're not necessarily at fault for the things in your life, but you're pretty much responsible for everything.
Yes. I am responsible for everything, every feeling, every resentment, every judgment, everything that I'm afraid of. Like there's nobody responsible but me. But that's a pretty tough realization. And that the medicine brings that to the forefront of that you are responsible. But you know what? That means you can turn off all the buttons that trigger you. You can make the changes you want to make. So it's incredibly powerful. But coming home and you've been in medicine and you realize a lot of things that are you're the one, the work is yours, it's not anyone else's. That can be pretty overwhelming, and it can throw you a little off balance too.
And a lot of things are my fault.
Yeah, and a lot of things are my fault too. It's all, I mean, really, ultimately, every reaction I have that there's uncomfortable is I chose that. But it's what I've been meditating on. I haven't seen you for several weeks because you've been in Peru and I haven't been in Mexico. But my work over the last several weeks has been meditating on that, on my responsibility for everything. It's pretty big work. Medicine work is big work, but it's some of the most beautiful work a human being can do to be more self-aware and grow and create what they want.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's a very good thing. It's a very positive thing because you get to kind of create your own person. You get to create your own life. You get to create how you respond to things. You get to create your own sense of identity and your own happiness ultimately. But it is not easy.
No, it's not easy. It's beautiful, and it takes a while too. You're not going to come do plant medicine and voila, then next week all the things are taken care of. The plant medicine brings a lot to awareness, which is beautiful, but then the work is when you get home. So, when we're talking about vulnerability, yes, when you get home, you're especially vulnerable because your defenses are down, your prefrontal cortex, your emotions are up, your ability to make connections is up, which is really nice because you can see synchronicities and different things in your life that you couldn't see before. But that vulnerability settles in a few days, in a week or so at least. I mean, at least within that time. And then it's the everyday work, one thing at a time of building the life that you want, which means the hard work of letting go of things that aren't working anymore. So I don't think you have to worry too much about vulnerability until when you get home. And then after that, after you kind of settled into it and saw what's there, then I think it's just, there's not a worry about vulnerability, but then it becomes a commitment to do the everyday work of what you want to create. So it's not forever. Like you don't have to worry about vulnerability forever when you come home. It's just for a few days, I think. Maybe you think different.
No, I mean, it could be a little bit longer than a few days, but it's something that's, I mean, it's not permanent. And the point of the vulnerability is to grow.
Yeah. And you can't grow without vulnerability. It's essential. It's just hard for some people. All right. The next topic you have is cultivating balance. What are your insights on cultivating balance?
Well, ultimately, actually the first draft of this topic was going to be making changes, but then I just kind of had this realization that this is very, very, very unique to an individual. And here's something that I'm going to bring up about Peru. So this retreat took place mostly in silence and mostly in isolation. And I just had this realization when I was there that, I'd done this before, but I did it with I had no intention. I did it unconsciously. I did it from a place in my life before ayahuasca, from basically depression and self-isolation, and not at all conscious. It was to escape feelings and to escape people and to escape the world. And then I just realized it was like the second day I'm there and I'm like, I've done this before, but I did it under completely different circumstances. And so, touching on the balance, I feel that one of the things when you're coming home, there's a lot of people that want to have these massive changes or start doing something different or not. But for me, like at this point in my life, sure, I think I'll have times with more silence and isolation. But like in previous points in my life, that wouldn't have served me. It wouldn't have served me. I was doing it too much and for the wrong reasons. And I think so something like this that's so unique for each individual, I think it's be in your best interest to kind of just analyze your past behaviors and then kind of work towards a balance with changing behaviors or anything you'd like to work towards.
Yeah. One of the frustrations I have with a lot of the information out there, like say like social media, or I don't know, there's probably other sources about doing plant medicine work, and maybe specifically ayahuasca, is that it's like if there's a lot of hoopla. Oh my gosh, it's changed my life. Oh my gosh, I'm a new person. Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. And I'm sure that for some people, maybe it's that big one time, but that really isn't what we're seeing. What we're seeing is that the ayahuasca will help you see yourself. And then little by little, we're just moving that needle just a little bit every day, every day, every day. And how the change happens is over time. And so we don't when I'm working with people at Mexisoul, I really encourage them, go home to the life you created, take some time, take some steps, a little at a time, right? What is the balance? How do you create balance? Because you go home to a life that you've created, which you have people that are important to you, finances, community, your health. There's all these things that are still really essential pieces of your life. And so looking at where do I want to create more balance? Where do I want to work? It's not no big giant steps. When you go home, it's baby steps, or maybe long strides, right? I'll give it long strides, but we don't want to jump over the moon, right? And we're not trying to reinvent your entire life. I know, Ruger, you're kind of an exception, but you didn't just go right from an ayahuasca retreat to a brand new life. You did it really fast. And you are one of the examples of somebody who just really moved that needle fast. But that's not what we're seeing with most people. And I'm the one that does the follow-up. I just did for the December retreat this last couple of days. I've been doing the follow-up calls for the participants, and amazing things are happening in their lives, really incredible things. 6 weeks later, I'm hearing about the changes they're making, but they're making them step by step, right? 6 weeks, they've done a lot of change, but they didn't come home and just I don't know, blow up their own life and start a new one. They worked within the life that they had, and where they didn't have balance, they're working to create more balance, maybe in their work, their families, their intimate relationships, their communities, their extended relationships, I'm just trying to think of some of the examples. Anyway, we're seeing some really amazing things coming out of the December retreat, but it was within balance. It was cultivating balance, but a lot has happened in 6 weeks, even with that.
Honestly, what popped into my head when you were mentioning that and bringing that up is related to myself. Is if you imagine that you are in a room that's completely dark, and you need to clean the room. I mean, it's almost impossible. And then you take ayahuasca and the light turns on. That's my analogy, because now the light's on. Now you can clean the room, but it's still up to you to clean the room.
That's a great analogy. It's still up to you to clean the room. And the work is tough. I mean, once you see the room is dirty and you see you're the one that made it dirty, it's kind of hard to face when you see it, right? But you can see it, and that makes the work so much easier, like 99% easier once you can see what the problem is. That's a great.
I mean, it's you still have to do it, but it's no longer something it's the lights are on.
Yeah, the lights are on. You can see it. Yeah, it's great. Anything else?
I'll say too, another point with balance that I think I have noticed both a little bit for myself and then other people that have come to the retreats, is they will leave, and I think they'll have these ideas of almost like what they should do or what they should have been doing. And this will be, some examples are related to like journaling or meditation or exercising. And I feel sometimes what people will typically do is they'll go and they'll have this idea that they're going to meditate for 3 hours a day and then run a marathon and then journal 20 pages every day.
Yeah, which is totally not necessary, actually, because once you see the dirty room, it doesn't take meditating 3 hours a day. It doesn't take running a marathon. It takes, picking up this piece and picking up this piece and rearranging this piece little by little, one step at a time. And it doesn't take the energy that people think it's going to take, really. There's a law called the law of least effort, and it's the most beautiful law. Once you see something and then you think, okay, how can this be done the most simply? And I use it all the time. It saves me so much time, so much energy, but you can use that in plant medicine. Okay, you see it. It's not all that complicated. Do the dishes. Not that hard. Just do the dishes.
Is there anything else you can think of or want to comment as far as balance?
Yeah, I do want to say something, and I hope I can express this clearly. But you keep changing over time, right? So you might do ayahuasca, say the December group did ayahuasca. They're having great changes 6 weeks later. But if I was to check in with them 6 months later or 1 year later, the chances are they're still evolving, they're still changing, the light is getting brighter in more rooms and being turned on. And so I think it's important to plan a long game. It's not a short game. You're going to keep having insights. You're going to keep noticing your own operating system and how it doesn't work as well as you think. And so you think you come to a retreat, say in December, well, probably the next December, you're still going to be working on that retreat. Not that you can't come to another retreat, because people do that all the time. They come and a couple months later, they come again, which is beautiful. But plan for a long game. This is not a short game. You're going to, you can get a lot done early on after coming home, but keep thinking you're going to keep this pace probably for many months of change. And so think of it in those terms, because it will help you create balance.
I think the only other thing I'd add is just be patient too and compassionate with yourself, because this ties back to the long game too. Like if you're trying to journal and you miss a few days, guess what? It's not that big of a deal. You can pick it up again. And then eventually, after a while, it's not even something that you are struggling with. It's just something you do.
I have 6 things that I want to do every day. I meditate. I want to go for a walk. I want to do yoga. I've got, you don't need to know all 6 things. I want to prepare my own food. And I get up and I work on that, right? But lots of days I don't get all 6 things done. But my mind is working on like, well, maybe if you arrange it this way, well, maybe if you did it that way. And I don't worry too much that I get all 6 things done. And it's not a really big deal. It's just that I would like to, but I'm not trying to do it all really fast. I'm just trying to create new habits. And what happens is my mind is figuring out how to include all 6 things in my day, and it's getting easier and easier. But I don't get frustrated that like, oh, I failed. I don't get my 6 things done. Now I should never have gone to ayahuasca. I should never have done that. Like it doesn't work that way. Just little by little, kindness to ourselves, little by little. And then pretty soon those changes are in place, and those changes are habits. And, that's what's happening with me. And I love not putting a lot of pressure on myself, but I still am. But the six things I'm doing are 6 things that are really important to me. And I'll get there, but I don't have to do it all at once, and I don't have to be perfect. Otherwise, you're going to get out of balance.
All right. And then,
okay. So your last one is, and I did them out of order, sorry, Ruger, but your last one is loneliness and relationships, with a smile. Like we're going to talk about it. Loneliness sounds awful, but you have a new perspective about that, or just an enlightened perspective about that, maybe.
Sure. Well, it's not just loneliness and that's it. What is going to typically happen though, this is very accurate for me, is the quantity of not just relationships, but the quantity of relationships, the quantity of like content you consume, the quantity of like entertainment, quantity of maybe even books or things you're interested in will probably go down, which at the very beginning results in quite a bit of loneliness. But what ultimately happens is that the quality of those things, the quality of the relationships, the quality of the content you consume, the quality of the books you read, those things typically go up.
Yeah, without a doubt. Without
And
a
that's
doubt.
just the time, that's just something that's going to take a bit of time. But I think it's really important just to be aware of those kind of things.
Mhm.
And it's not even necessarily, it's mostly your choice, I feel like, especially when it comes to, maybe relationships or people you spend a lot of time with. A lot of times it's just you find there's more, you find some of the things you used to take part in or enjoy. Sometimes it really was just, it wasn't necessarily a healthy, coming from a healthy place. Sometimes it was being addicted to maybe drama or lower vibrational things.
Often, like really often that's the case. And one of the things that I really been, my awareness has been heightened about since doing plant medicine is that my energy is like the most valuable resource I have. And so if I download a book and I think I'll like it, I might get into it 2 chapters and this is not interesting enough for me. Or I might go down and watch a movie with my husband and a lot of times I'll just, after the first 10 minutes, say, you watch it if you want. It's just not interesting enough. And just because there's just so many things that I don't want to say I want like a need or want or crave. It's not like that. But I want to be conscious of what I think about. And a lot of things you mentioned are related to stories, like books have stories, movies have stories, people have stories. And once you start seeing that's just a story and it doesn't have a lot of value, particularly for me, it's just not, I just don't want to sit and listen to a story because the story is from one person's point of view. It's not a very, it's not idea based. It's not anything that has any lasting value for me to hear somebody's story that they've told over and over and over again, or a book that I don't really think has much value as far as where I want to go. And so I think that's what happens is that we just become more picky about what we are consuming once we're more aware of what we want to consume or where we want to go or what's the most important to us or what we value the most. And then, it creates some people drifting away, but then the other people who come tend to be people who you find more, or like at least I find more interesting. My people, I just want to be clear, like my people are mostly all intact. I didn't really change people. After my friends are the same, my family's the same, all of that. But what's happened is I'm very picky about if somebody says you want to go to lunch. Well, do I or do I not? Is that how I want to spend my time? And so I'm saying no more often to invitations, no to movies, no to books, because it's just not where I want to spend my time. But when that initially starts happening, it can feel lonely. It can feel like, oh, what's happening to me? Am I going to have people left? And you will. Of course you will. Marvelous, marvelous, marvelous people, more interesting books, more interesting movies. So it's just a little hump that people almost always go through of feeling like this might be a lonely road, and it won't be.
But also, like, if you just ask yourself, which would you rather have? Would you have much, much better relationships with the people that you love and you're close to,
Mhm.
and have the ones that aren't to fall off, or would you just have much rather have many more relationships? I mean, and that's basically what it ends up ultimately happening.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. For me, I want the relationships that I pick and the most important or the most interesting, and I want intimate relationships. So to just hear people talking and there's nothing really being said that's not, that's interesting. I mean, I just don't want to be in that space. So yeah, I don't think there's any problem with it at all. It's just that I see it in coaching too, and I coach people and they become more and more conscious and more aware what they want and more conscious about like the damage that can be done in stories, or that certain environments feel uncomfortable, certain people feel uncomfortable. And inevitably when I'm coaching a client, it takes much longer in coaching than it does in medicine. Medicine is a pretty fast process. But in coaching, inevitably, every client that I have for very long will say, "Ooh, this is getting kind of lonely." And I'm like, yes. And you can go back. And they'll say, no way. And I'm like, then just keep going forward because it'll be okay. And it always is, of course.
I think too, maybe to loop this back around to the first topic of vulnerability is you're going to be more open with your own feelings, with your own intentions. And some people just, they don't want to be a part of that world. They don't want to feel things. They want to stay with things suppressed. They don't want the vulnerability. And
Mhm.
I
And
think,
they really don't. I have these two girlfriends that I call them my sisters because we used to be a sister mind, but now we've given up the mind part. Now we're just sisters and we go to lunch once or breakfast once a month. And I was just last week with them and they were talking about like our personalities and they're like, whoa, Jamie, like, you're not intense there. I don't know. It came up logically about why we are sisters. And one of them said, you're not intense, Jamie, but you do go deep really fast. And I do. And there's a lot of people who really don't like that. And I honor that because I can go too deep. I mean, I can not too deep, but I can go deep. I can go fast. And, I'm really interested and I want to know what's there. And for some people, they just want to like, oh, too much for me. And okay, like that's okay. I feel like I was just a little vulnerable there because I know I'm a little bit heightened aware of how I want the conversation to be interesting or not at all. And I know that it's off-putting to some people. It's okay.
well, it makes your life more interesting.
Well, I have some of the most interesting friends, like you. One of my friends is Ruger Abear, creator of Mexisoul, and you're pretty interesting. Your journey's been very interesting.
I'm friends with you. I'm friends with the owner of the retreat center, and I'm friends with the shaman, and those are like my best friends.
Right?
But
Yeah.
I mean, how interesting are the stories that we have?
Yeah, but when you imagine in my little town where I live, my very little conservative town, I'm at breakfast and I'm like, oh, I had this with one of my friends. This also happened last week. And I'm at breakfast and I'm like, oh, I want to tell you, I had this conversation with my shaman and it was something that was happening to me spiritually. And then I'm thinking, oh, I may have just gone too far because, I was sharing the details and I'm like, oh, people maybe aren't that interested in like some of the things that we see and experience being in the medicine. And I mean, she was great with it, but my little alarm went off. That's like, remember, Jamie, like sometimes, you going home and talking about your shaman in your little conservative town and some insights and learning and how he sees the world and how he sees a lot of things is a lot for people. Like it really is. And I'm also, I feel like Umberto, our shaman, is a very good friend of mine. I love him. I feel blessed every day that he's my friend, but it might be like a little much for even some of my closest friends to be just, talking casually about insights from the shaman. Now I really feel like I've disclose too much.
Me too. I mean, being a little bit out there spiritually is something I never ever thought I'd be like ever.
Me, not like this. I was just like, my master's degree is in transpersonal psychology, which is really all about like, who are we really in the big picture spiritually? But I planted my feet firmly in this life. Like, how can I help you? And when I am taking clients, how can I help you in this life? What are the practical things I can do in this life? And I planted my feet there solidly. And now I find myself when I'm working with clients, I'm like, well, this is spiritual idea that might interest you. And then I'm having to judge, like, have I gone too far with this person? And it honestly, it's been a challenge. It's been recently quite a challenge for me to judge my audience and remember that not everybody goes to Mexico once a month and works with a shaman or the owner of Mexisoul, who is one of the most beautiful, amazing women on the planet and so strong and so powerful. She's hard to even explain to anyone. She's so amazing, right?
Marina's definitely hard to explain to people.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So,
well, I think that ties back though to the concept, I mean, of loneliness is because the people you will attract, the people that pop up into your lives are usually pretty exceptional people, and you'll find them. I mean, we're talking about loneliness, you'll go through, for me, I'll go through like into a group or a crowd, or I'll go on, a trip or something, and I'll end up happening to somehow connect with like the one person out of 4,000 people that is somewhat like-minded to me. Like you also, I feel like the loneliness happens, but you're also attracting um more people that are more aligned with like you and this new person you're becoming.
And I think I'm learning to relax into that a little bit and try not to be so worried about it, because also what's happening to me is, I have my private practice and I'm working with you. I contract with you to work there once a month, but I have to make a living as well, right? But what's happening to me too, even though I say it might be a lot for some people, but I am attracting some of them, not plant medicine based necessarily, but I am attracting some of the most amazing clients, top clients, as far as their own development and their own path. And so it works. So it's the same thing you're saying is they may not tread the same path that I'm on, but the people I'm attracting that for clients are quite interesting and remarkable human beings. So, there's that too.
Is there anything else you want to add? We
No,
pretty much covered.
I just want to say, Ruger, good job on finally going to a retreat that you didn't have to plan.
Yeah, it was nice to not have to think.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that kind of wraps it up. I mean, the main thing is just to be aware of these things, to be aware of the vulnerability, to be aware of the the emotions that come up with it. If you're trying to work towards something, keep the balance part in mind, and then this topic of loneliness. But ultimately, they're not necessarily the easiest things, but they're ultimately the best. I mean, they will help propel you to be the person that you really want to be.
Yeah.
And I guess the last point too is this video is probably more for people who've come to the retreats and now they're leaving. But I think it also applies to people that are interested. So just things to be aware of. And then if anyone watching this is interested in a retreat, there's the contact information below, and I'm happy to have a phone call to discuss anything we talked about in this video or the retreats or any questions or concerns that people have.
Okay, sounds good. All right. Thank you, Ruger.